The Las Vegas Raiders have officially beat the New Orleans Saints, and the Raiders have improved to a record of 4-12. And the Raiders are now at the point where the draft pick really doesn't matter. The Raiders went from essentially having the first overall pick to the sixth coming into this game, and they knew they'd jump up to five if they had lost. With obviously the Jags and Titans game, one of the two teams had to win. But with the Raiders win today, the Raiders are going to drop to the ninth overall pick, and we'll talk about the draft a little bit later on. Because we found out a lot about some of these quarterbacks yesterday, and we'll get into it, man. Very, very exciting stuff. So the Raiders do get the win, right? And at the end of the day, the Raiders looked really, really good today in certain aspects, right? It wasn't perfect. Obviously, we fired our offensive coordinator. So we obviously had to kind of deal with that for this season. At the same time, our head coach, I don't think is that good. And then, of course, the quarterback situation has been really awful for the Raiders. We started with Gardner Minshew, went to Aiden O'Connell. He got hurt. We went back to Gardner Minshew. At some point, you also got a couple other quarterbacks kind of come in. But the Raiders are now at the point where with Aiden O'Connell, it's actually looked really solid. But more than that, right? And I should say, it's been really good, right? It hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been the Raiders are putting up 40 points a game. I don't know if Aiden O'Connell's the future. If it's up to me right now, I'd say he's still a backup caliber quarterback. But I don't 100% think that it's guaranteed the Raiders will come into next season with a whole nother quarterback, right? I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same two quarterbacks at this point. But also, we'll talk about it here in a second. I wouldn't be surprised if we still end up drafting someone like Shedeur Sanders, or maybe it's one of these other quarterbacks that chooses to come out. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But in today's game against the Saints, we kind of saw the same thing with what we've seen from the defense side of the football for the last 3 to 4 weeks. The defense has been dominant, right? They've been absolutely dominant. They've been getting after it, and keeping in mind that's without Maxx, that's without Christian, that's without Malcolm Koonce. The defense has been very, very solid, and Patrick Graham deserves so much credit for having that defense kind of doing its thing out there. We had also heard a report earlier this week from Tom Pelissero that Patrick Graham actually declined a contract extension with the Raiders. And I found that very interesting, right? Obviously, the obvious situation is, hey, maybe he wants to become a head coach. That's why he decided not to take that extension. But it still doesn't make sense to me because the guys run a really, really good defense for the Raiders. And something tells me if the Raiders were 100% healthy coming into week one, and if they did not have Luke Getz as their offensive coordinator, right? Like, let's say we got Cliff Kingsbury or even Scott Turner for that matter, our team would have looked a lot better, right? Like, things would have been a lot different for the Raiders had we been fully healthy, had we had a competent offensive coordinator at the beginning of the season. Regardless, the Raiders are kind of where they're at, but the defense has been playing really, really, really good. And you got to give a lot of credit to these guys on the defense side of the football. The guy that's really looked impressive to me over the past couple of weeks has been Jack Jones. Of course, he's given up some touchdowns, right? There's some issues, but we did talk about this last week, and I'll just say it again. We don't really know what Patrick Graham's telling Jack Jones, right? Jack Jones getting beat. It's not like he doesn't know that it's coming, or these double moves are coming. The thing is it almost feels like Patrick Graham is telling this guy to jump those routes, and he had an interception today. And I believe he had an interception last week or the week before that as well. He had a pick six earlier this season as well, right? So, it's not like he's not making plays. And today specifically had multiple pass breakups. He's kind of getting after it. Isaiah Palamau is another guy that deserves a lot of credit. Last week he had 2 forced fumbles. Today he had multiple plays in which he, broke up the pass, or he made that game-saving caliber touchdown. It wasn't game-saving, but he stops the guy from ultimately picking up the first down. I think he did that once or maybe even twice today. Palomau's been solid, right? He comes off the edge and he blitzes sometimes as well. So the guy's just been doing a really good job for the Raiders. I hope the Raiders bring him back, man. Isaiah Palomau's that guy that it hasn't clicked yet for him 100%, but you're starting to see some flashes. So I think coming into next season, assuming we keep Patrick Graham, assuming Isaiah Palomau's the starter coming into the season, I think there's a real chance this guy ends up becoming a top 10 safety in the NFL, potentially next season, right? Now, keep in mind, safety is a hard position to evaluate because oftentimes linebacker safeties are really based off of the defensive scheme, and Palomau just kind of fits this scheme. And Nate Hobbs was out there doing having some good plays. Adam Butler, man, is continuing to shine and continuing to make himself money, man. Today he got to the quarterback multiple times. He ended up having a sack, although I think it probably ends up getting splitted. Tyree Wilson, Clavon Chasen, these guys are continuously making plays, right? So it's been very, very good for the Raiders with what we've kind of seen over the past couple of weeks on the defense side of the football. Thomas Harper got his first interception of the season as well. So shout out to Thomas Harper for getting that. And really, that sealed the game, right? Um, let's talk about the offense a little bit, right? Because I do want to clarify. I don't think the Raiders' offense is by any means a top tier offense, right? We're obviously missing a number one wide receiver, which we had with Devontae, but obviously he ended up requesting the trade. And then, we obviously moved off of Luke Getsy, and things got better from the time we moved off of Luke Getsy, right? We started putting up more yards, right? But the yards didn't lead to points. I think a quarterback issue was kind of part of that. At the same time, our run game kind of got going. The spacing, everything looked a lot better. We made Brock Bowers the focal point of the offense. And Brock Bowers has been dominating as well, right? You got to give a lot of credit to Brock Bowers for kind of being that difference maker for the Raiders right now. Brock Bowers officially broke 2 records today. I think he might have broken all-time Raiders tight end record as well. Don't quote me on that. But Darren Waller had that. If Brock Bowers plays next week, if he didn't break it, he'll break that one. But that one doesn't really matter too much. I think the two that matter is he broke the NFL yards record for tight ends, rookie tight ends specifically. Mike Ditka was the leader of that. Brock Bowers broke that today. And then he also broke the all-time reception leader as a rookie coming in. So Puka Nacua broke that record last year. He held it for 1 year, and then Brock Bowers broke it the following year. So shout out to Brock Bowers for that. 7 catches, 77 yards for Bowers. Very solid, very hard to bring down, and we saw that today. Jacoby Myers, 5 catches, 61 yards. I think he had 1 or 2 catches that kind of came back as well. Amir Abdullah, 20 carries, 115 yards. Our run game looks a lot better right now, right? And I'm not surprised, to be honest, that the run game's having more success because of the fact that, we made a couple of changes on the offensive line like 5-6 weeks back. Putting Paris Johnson at center, I think, was a big part of the Raiders starting to have a little bit of success. But of course, as you guys know, this game and last game, he went back to left guard, and then Andre James kind of came back. But I do think the fact that Andre James was kind of pulled out of there and then kind of forced back in, sometimes that fires the guy up a little bit. And with Andre James, I think it's made him play a little bit better. Now, don't get me wrong. Last week, he still had multiple losing snaps where he got beat. But he did look better last week than where he was at the beginning of this season. And I think today, the offensive line was very, very solid. Aiden O'Connell was sacked, I think, once. And that, too, Aiden O'Connell, that sack was probably on him more than the offensive line. The pocket was breaking down. It was a 3-step drop, so you have to get the ball out. He did it, and he started trying to run backwards, and he ended up getting... He's not outrunning people, right? And then he ended up getting sacked. But Aiden O'Connell looked pretty good as well, right? So the O-line looked good today. Pass protection was phenomenal. We're on the right path, right? And again, I know the loss part of it sucks for the draft stock, but we're on the right path with this roster and with this team, right? DJ Glaze looks really, really good right now. Obviously, he's a rookie. He's a third-round pick, so there's developmental things that we got to see going from this year to next year. But in the offseason, if this guy really puts the work in, DJ Glaze could become really, really solid for the Raiders, right? Like, everything Glaze has done up to this point is solid. Very, very solid. And I want to see what this guy can continue to do. Going into this next season, I want to see if Glaze can really improve. Maybe gets a little bit quicker. He adds a little bit of... weight's not the right word because I want him to tone down a little bit, right? So he's a little bit quicker. But maybe he adds a little bit more muscle, right? Maybe he gets a little bit stronger in that aspect, but I want him to cut down that weight to be able to move a little bit quicker. And I think going into next season, I don't know if it's going to be Scott Turner. I don't know if it's going to be Antonio Pierce. But I do know that DJ Glaze will get at least 1 more year to prove himself at right tackle. And I do think there's a good chance he is the future at right tackle. But again, we'll have to have him improve and show it before we can crown it. But, sometimes you can tell with guys if they're going to be good or if they have a chance to be good or if they're not. Right? With Thayer Munford as an example, we knew right away this guy's not going to be a good tackle. Right? And then with DJ Glaze, there's at least upside and you can at least see some things there on tape. Paris Johnson, I think, is going to be a super sharp player. So the Raiders do got 2 pieces going into next year. We'll see how that kind of translates. The quarterback position will obviously be interesting as well because, I'm not sold on Aiden O'Connell, but we're also picking with the 9th overall pick now. So what did the Raiders do at this point, right? We won 2 straight games. You go from 1 down to 6. You could have gotten to 5 if you lost today, but now you're going to drop down to 9. And I think there's a real chance the Raiders could actually beat the Chargers next week. I'm not sure. I think the Chargers did clinch the actual playoffs, but the seeding aspect's probably not 100% determined yet. So I think for the Raiders, you only drop one pick at this point if you win one more game, right? Why not try to win this last game against the Chargers? Why not try to potentially make it a little bit more difficult for them, right? Maybe put them in a worse seating spot. Maybe I don't think they'll have home field advantage at all, anyways, because they're not, they're not, at the point where the Chiefs obviously are. But why not try making it a little bit harder for the Chargers, right? So we'll see what actually ends up happening next week. And we'll get one last game of Aiden O'Connell as our quarterback to prove himself, right? If he ends up having a good, clean, consistent game the way he had today. And, let's be honest. I know we only scored 25 points today, right? It wasn't perfect from a points per game aspect, but we got to realize we don't have a true number one wide receiver. We don't have a true running back that is a difference maker, right? And Amir Abdullah is a good running back, but he's, he got hurt after 20 carries. That's what you get from Amir Abdullah, right? And he did have a couple of nice runs, but Amir Abdullah is not game-changing. A lot of these yards and carries that this guy's getting is because of the offensive line and the run scheme, right? The O-line the Raiders have is legit, right, at this point. It just has to continue to develop with having two rookies out there, obviously. And, again, I think for the Raiders, when you look at what our offense did against the Saints, no turnovers, right? It was a very clean game. We punted the football. We played the defensive style, right, that Antonio Pierce kind of wanted to, right? Punt the football, play defense, pick up those necessary yards you kind of need. And that's the style that allows you to win. It's the style that's allowing the Chargers to win right now, right? It's why the Chargers are, they're not scoring 40 points a game, but their defense is doing a solid job. They're keeping them in games. The defense is forcing turnovers. And I think for the Raiders, we're banged up on the defense side of the football, but we're having success still, right? And, I think with Aiden O'Connell, it'll be interesting to see if the Raiders actually give him another year. Obviously, I want a rookie quarterback, right? I'm not going to lie to you guys. I think the Raiders should go with one of the guys that's considered the best quarterback coming out. Now, the Giants won today, which is huge if you want a rookie quarterback, right? The Giants winning today means they drop back, I think, to like pick 3 or 4. And the New England Patriots now hold the number 1 overall pick. And that's a great thing for the Raiders because now if you want Cam Ward, you can trade up for that pick, right? And I'm going to be the first to tell you guys, if I'm the Raiders, I'm 100% considering that, right? Because I think Cam Ward is the best quarterback in this class. And then I think there's a big drop-off to the second quarterback. Like, I'm not sold on Shedeur Sanders. I did a film breakdown of his game on my other YouTube channel called The Football Scout. I'll pin that down in the comments below if you guys want to check it out. But basically, Shedeur Sanders to me is a guy that struggles within structure. And I'll give you guys an example. In yesterday's game against BYU, there was I didn't think it was a 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9 situation. They run spacings to the left, right? I'm sorry. They run a sticks concept to the left, and he can make the pass. There's a guy wide open. And instead of throwing it, he takes off and running, and he picks up a yard. So if he hit the receiver running the quick out route, right? Had he hit that slot wide receiver, he picks up about 7 yards. And it's 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2. Instead, he takes off running and he picks up 1 yard running. And then there are other moments, right? Everyone saw the sack play when Shedeur Sanders, he made that mistake of like running backwards. He lost like 30 yards, whatever it was, and they missed the field goal. There's a lot of things like that with Shedeur that I think are some issues. And with that, I'm not sure Shedeur is going to be a first-round pick. Nor am I sure if he might be a first-round pick, right? The quarterback class is kind of bad. But I'm just not sure, if I'm the Raiders, I would take Shedeur. Now, you could wait. If you had pick 9 or 10, there's a chance he does fall. And you could take him at that point. And I'm not out on doing that if Tom Telesco and if Scott Turner actually think they can develop this guy and if he has the upside to be a good quarterback. In my opinion, if you're a quarterback and you cannot play within the structure of an offense, right? If there's a levels concept design, if you can't make those passes, if you can't go through your reads, right? If you can't do that at the bare minimum, you're not going to have success. Now, you can obviously develop that and get better at that. And with Shedeur, he creates plays, which is phenomenal. Right? When this guy gets out of the pocket, it's different. But for me, I think Cam Ward's the best quarterback in this class. I think he shows that he can play within structure. And he also shows that he can make plays with his legs. He can make people miss. I think Cam Ward is by far the best quarterback in this class, and I think there's a big drop-off after that. I'm not the only one that thinks that. I've spoken to multiple people that I work with as actual scouts, and they all think kind of the same thing within that. Some people don't think Shedeur is even the second best quarterback. Some people think there's other quarterbacks like Carson Beck that could be better. Now, I'm not 100% sold on Beck, but, Beck did have a much better season last year when he had Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, and then coming into this year, apparently he had a shoulder injury that's hindered him over the course of the season. I don't know. But Carson Beck's another quarterback some people are saying has the potential to go top 10. So I don't know what's going to end up happening. But if the Raiders want to trade up, because of the fact that the Giants won today, the Patriots have the number one overall pick, you might have that option to trade up with the Patriots if you really want Cam Ward. Or if you don't want to give up all those assets, alternatively, if you're the Raiders, you could wait until Shador or Carson Beck fall to 9 or 10. If it's not, then maybe it's Jalen Monroe. Right? You can wait it out and see ultimately what happens. Worst case scenario, you just take the best player available at that point. Right? I still think there's a chance that because the quarterback position is so valuable, teams might still reach for quarterbacks. Right? We might still see two guys kind of go up, up top. The value, some positions are more valued as well than others. So like defensive end, offensive tackles, wide receivers, you might see like 4 or 5 guys go above, and that could allow the Raiders to get whoever's the best player in this draft. Maybe this, maybe that's Malachi Starks, right? Maybe Malachi Starks is there at 9, and the Raiders feel like, hey, this guy's a difference maker. He's a weapon for any NFL defense. Let's take this guy, right? So I think the Raiders can still end up getting, the best player available if they go that approach. They get a quarterback if they go that approach. And to me, it really doesn't matter at this point that the Raiders have won these last 2 games. I think at the end of the day, when the greatest quarterback comes out, it's not guaranteed for that to translate, right? We've seen that with Caleb Williams, and we've seen that with Trevor Lawrence. And those are the 2 quarterbacks that were super, super hyped over the past 7 years that I can kind of think about. And neither of those 2 guys are really that good right now, right? Trevor Lawrence, I think, Caleb Williams, he'd still be really good. We don't really know, right? So he's a rookie. I think year 2 and 3, you can kind of tell. But with Trevor Lawrence, he's not that good, right? He's barely like a top 10 quarterback. So again, I think for the Raiders, we'll see what ends up happening when draft time comes. They get the win today. I enjoyed the win because of the fact that they're able to kind of play their style, and at the end of the day, a win's a win. Now, before we go forward, I want to just take a second to give a big shout out to the sponsor of this channel, because this content would not be possible without Underdog. If you guys have never utilized Underdog before, trust me, man, you guys are missing out. I don't do traditional fantasy sports that often. I did do 1 league this year, but generally speaking, I'm not really doing it anymore. And that's mostly because of Underdog. Underdog has this game that I really, really enjoy. It's called Pick'em. Essentially, you're going to go out there and just make picks that you think are going to be right. They'll have pretty much every pick you can think of for every player, and they have multiple categories as well. So an example would be, I think Aiden O'Connell is going to throw for 125 yards. And you're essentially just going to pick higher on that, right? I think he'll have more than 125 yards. You might say, hey, Dak Prescott's going to have at least 2 touchdowns. I'll pick higher on that. You might say Caleb Williams is going to have a rushing touchdown. And some of those stats also give you multipliers, right? So usually for quarterbacks rushing it in, right? That's something most quarterbacks aren't doing every single week. You'll get like a 4x multiplier on that. So depending on the multiplier, depending on how many picks, you can turn $5 into $400, $1,000, right? Whatever it ends up being. Obviously, it depends on the multiplier, but Underdog to me is one of those places that I pretty much do every single week at this point. Very fun. It makes like watching the Jets and the Dolphins without Tua. It makes them interesting, right? So check out Underdog. If you guys have never used them before, it is the best place. Trust me when I say that. Go to underdogfantasy.com, use my promo code that you guys see on the screen, or use the app. I recommend the app. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.